Julie Basken lived in Oklahoma City in the year 1996. Julie was born and raised in Benton, Arkansas. She moved to Oklahoma to go to school at Oklahoma University. She worked at the university's golf club. Julie was nearly finished with her bachelor's degree in dance. She wanted to be a dancer, and after she finished college, she wanted to open a dance school and teach kids how to dance. Julie was said to be popular at school and to have a lot of friends. She was also very skilled. Julie and her friend Ryan James spent the night of December 19th, 1996, at his grandparents' house. Ryan and Julie both had jobs at the golf club. After dinner, they went to a show. Also, they decided to get together for lunch the next day. Julie stayed with his grandparents until 10 p.m., when she left to hang out with some of her other friends. Julie and her friends played Monopoly and gave each other Christmas gifts at one of their houses. Julie said goodbye because she was moving back home the next day. The end of her college term had just come. Her roommate, Megan, was also there. Julie told Megan that she would drive her to Will Rogers Airport at 5 a.m. the next day. Julie and Megan chose to stay up the whole night. They left their friend's house around 2 a.m. and drove to a place called The Kettle. They went back to their apartment just after 3 a.m. to get Megan's stuff. After a while, they left the flat again, and at 4:30 a.m., they were on their way to the airport. They got there in half an hour. Megan was dropped off at the airport by Julie at 5:30 a.m., and Megan watched Julie drive away in her Red Eagle Summit. Many people heard a scared woman screaming in the Dublin West apartments, where Julie lived. Someone in the area called 911 to tell them what they had heard. The person said that their wife had heard a strange and horrible scream coming from the parking lot of the apartment complex. When asked what was wrong, the person told the 911 operator that they didn't want to go outside because they were afraid to. Ryan James showed up a few hours later for their lunch date at Julie's house. Julie couldn't be found anywhere, and neither could her car. Then Ryan told her that she was lost. Not long after that, Julie's parents came to her room. They got in their car and drove from Arkansas to help Julie move back to her old house. Instead of Julie, they found police officers who said she was lost. 12 hours after Julie went missing, her body was found on the edge of a lake about 15 miles from her apartment. She was in water up to her hips, and her hands were tied behind her back with shoelaces. Julie had been shot once, and it looked like she was going to die. A bullet hit the back of her head, causing a pressure wound. There were also signs that she was hurt at the lake. Investigators found possible signs in the sand near where Julie's body was found. There were 2 sets of tracks going down to the lake, but only one set came back. The police thought that the person who shot Julie owned the other set. After looking at the sketch and talking to Nike about it, it was decided that it fit a size 9 men's Nike running shoe, more specifically a Nike Air 2 running shoe. A pink leotard with the letters JB on the label was found about 20 feet away from Julie's body. It was hers. The leotard had male DNA on it, so it was put away and will be used when DNA technology is better. An autopsy showed that Julie was killed by a single .22 caliber bullet. When Julie went to college, she made a lot of friends. The spy set out to talk to as many of them as possible in the hopes that someone would know something useful. But that wasn't the case. No one really didn't like Julie, and she didn't have any bad breakups or anything. When the cops went to Julie's apartment, it was in great shape. No signs showed that there was a fight going on. They found Julie's car in an apartment building just 1 block away from where she lived. The red sand on the floor of the car looked like the red sand on the lakeshore where Julie's body was found. People who looked into this thought it was pretty strange. Why would someone take Julie away, kill her at the lake, and then drive her car back almost to where she was taken? Saddening, there were no foreign hairs, fibers, or prints in the car. Also, there wasn't any sign of a fight. Julie's phone had been taken. To see if they could help, the police looked at her cell phone information. Someone called her cell phone twice after she had died, according to the reports. One was to ask about the weather, and the other was to a number that didn't work at the time. Even though there were hints and a $70,000 reward, nothing big happened, and the case went cold for a while. Then, a month after Julie died, a man called the police. He said that on the night Julie went missing, a car like hers pulled out in front of him and he almost hit it. The witness followed Julie's car for about 5 miles because he wanted to talk to the driver. The driver kept looking at the witness in the rearview mirror and then quickly drove away. The witness had a quick look at the driver's face and then had to tell the cops what he looked like. This is the picture they made of the young man who was driving Julie's car away from the lake. He might have been in college, and he might have been Hispanic. He was strong and had long black hair. The Oklahoma news sources kept showing the combined sketch. He was a mystery to everyone. Nothing was done about the case for 4.5 years. The cops got a letter from a woman in jail in Oklahoma County. She said that it was possible that one of her old friends killed Julie. He was 23 years old, and his name was Dennis Sturmer. Sturmer worked in the building and had never done anything wrong. But he lived only 4 blocks from Julie's apartment at the time of the crime, and the composite sketch looked like him. Sturmer refused to answer any questions or give a DNA sample. The cops had to get a court order to get his DNA. The DNA taken from the leotard at the scene of the crime was very, very close to his DNA. He was no longer thought to be a chance, because being very, very close is not the same as being the same. His only male cousin who was still alive was his brother. This must be him, right? The puzzle, which had been going on for 5 years, seemed like it would finally be solved. But there was a catch. His brother's DNA didn't match up. The case again went cold. The fact that Julie's parents might not live long enough to see justice done must have made them sad. Investigators were sure this wouldn't happen, so they tried to get DNA samples from every guy Julie had ever met. More than 200 guys were tested, but none of them matched. No one seemed to be able to figure out what was going on. 6 years after Julie died, Anthony Castillo Sanchez was arrested for beating up his lover. Sanchez had to give a sample of his DNA to the cops after he was arrested so they could test it. When investigators looked into Sanchez's past, they found some interesting things. He lived just 1 mile away from Julie. Investigators looked at the notebook of one of Sanchez's lovers for the month Julie died. On one note, she said that Anthony bought her and himself a pair of Nike running shoes. Sanchez was wearing size 9 shoes. At the very least, it showed that Sanchez had the same brand and size of shoes as the criminal. One of Anthony's old girlfriends had a cell phone number that was only off by 1 point from the number that was called on Julie's phone after she died. Sanchez might have tried to call his ex-girlfriend's number from memory but got 1 figure wrong. Sanchez and his father had a strange habit of shooting .22 caliber guns at the wall of the house they rented. Investigators took a bullet from the house. The gun used to shoot Julie was found to be the source of the bullet. Only 6 companies made .22 caliber guns with bullets that fit in the right holes. In 24, Anthony Sanchez's DNA was matched to the male DNA that was found on Julie's leotard. Sanchez was only 18 years old when he did the crime. It's interesting to think about how quickly he would have been caught if he had called the right number on Julie's phone. Anthony Castillo Sanchez was found to be guilty in 26. As punishment for the crime, it was decided that he would die. Even in March 2023, Sanchez was still fighting his sentence. He said that his father did the wrong thing, not him. In April 2022, his father, Glenn Sanchez, killed himself and told his partner that it was him the whole time. But police have already looked into the idea that the DNA might belong to Glenn Sanchez and found that it does not. Court documents say that there is a 1 in 200 quadrillion chance that the match was a mistake for Caucasians, 1 in 20 quintillion chance for African Americans, and 1 in 94 quadrillion chance for Southwest Hispanics. Anthony Sanchez will be put to death on September 21st, 2023. Loura Salmon. The Battle of Stones River happened in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, during the Civil War. This fight was very well known. Murfreesboro has grown a lot in the last few years. Because of Middle Tennessee State University, a lot of people have moved there. People in Murfreesboro still talk about what a college student did wrong in 1984. On May 31st, 1984, a farmer in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, was coming home from work when he saw something shocking. The farmer saw clothes in the field and went over to find out what was going on. When he did that, he saw that the clothes were covering the body of a girl. She was trying to hide herself by only wearing a bra, 2 pairs of pants, and a dark jacket. She had one of the arms of the jacket around her neck. The first pair of jeans turned out to be hers, and the second pair turned out to be men's. In one of her hands, the cops also found a pair of underwear. She was 18 years old and her name was Loura Salmon. She was born on October 6th, 1965, in Tennessee. She went to Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and worked as a checker at Kroger. The autopsy showed that Loura's head was hit hard by something, which is what killed her. The rocks near her body looked like they were used to kill her. Blood on those rocks and other things showed that she had been hit in the head up to 10 times. During the probe, the medical examiner also found that Loura had slept with someone in the 24 to 48 hours before she died. There were no crashes or other signs that it wasn't working for both sides. One of the most important clues for the cops was the pair of men's pants that were on top of Loura's body. The DNA on the jeans was from a man, but it wasn't from the man Loura was with. Instead, it came from someone else. Most likely, this DNA came from the person who did it. Unfortunately, DNA testing had just started, so police couldn't do much more with the DNA than store it. Then, the investigators worked on making a timeline of events because they thought it would help them figure out what happened. Loura started her day by going to work at a Kroger grocery store. According to the store's logs, she left around 1 p.m. after that. She was supposed to go to Middle Tennessee State University to check her grades and meet with some office staff. She also wanted to go swimming at her grandmother's house and at the university, but she never made it to either place. Loura's car was found near a store. Her body was found miles away. Investigators didn't find any DNA that didn't belong to Loura in her car, but they did find a hair that wasn't hers. It was kept in the same place as the clothes' DNA evidence. Also important, the investigators found dirt in the wheel wells. The FBI lab found that they all fit together and that it was likely that Loura's car was on the road near where the crime happened. This meant that someone killed Loura and then drove her car back to where she worked. The only thing the tip did was make the cops think that whoever did it knew Loura. People who saw Loura the night before she died said she was at a nearby bar. The people who saw Loura dancing said that she was with a young man they didn't know, but the cops couldn't find him. Loura's body was found in an area that high school and college students used as a lover's lane. They went there to have parties, bonfires, and other things. Then, people started to think that Loura went to Lover's Lane with a guy she met at the bar after she got off work. There, Loura turned down a guy who didn't know her, and he killed her. Since the cops didn't know who the young man was, they talked to Loura's high school boyfriend, David Kyle Gilly. He was known to be jealous, but he didn't go because he had a good reason not to. His dad told the police that David was home all day when Loura died, so he couldn't have done it. He didn't do it, so he couldn't have. Investigators were about to give up when a woman in Nashville, Tennessee, called the cops with a possible clue. She said that a guy named John Taylor attacked her during the event. Taylor is said to have told her that he would treat her like he treated Loura. Taylor told the police that he didn't hit the woman, and that he hadn't talked about or done anything with Loura. A check of Taylor and Loura's past showed that they both went to the same college. Even the gym he went to, the Olympus Athletic Club and Spa, was the same. Taylor and Loura both went to the same house parties and events. Even more important, on the day Loura died, Taylor was close to the university. Taylor often hit his lovers, or other women who were with him. All of this pointed to him as a possible suspect. The FBI experts were then asked to find a match between Taylor's hair and the foreign hair that was found in Loura's car. The FBI told them that the hair they found in the car looked like it belonged to John Taylor. Another bad person was caught. At the time, it would be a long time before mitochondrial DNA could be looked for in hair. There could have been about 20% of the people with hair like that. Even though it seemed like Taylor was going to jail, this wasn't enough proof. There would be a few more turns in this case. Investigators found nothing that linked him to the crime scene or showed that he was with Loura that day. Men's jeans with a 36-inch inseam and a 30-inch waist were found at the crime scene. Taylor was a small guy, so the jeans wouldn't have helped him. Investigators had no choice but to move on to other possible targets. Over the years, they looked into more than 100 possible suspects, but nothing came of it. Lauren McKee, Loura's mother, made a promise to her daughter at her grave. She told Loura she would do the right thing. Lorraine didn't know how she could keep that promise, but she decided it was the last thing she could do for Loura. It took many long years before help finally came. Dan Goodwin was a college friend of Loura's. He took her out a few nights before her life was taken. Dan asked her if she wanted to go to the movies. She said yes, so on May 27, 1984, they went to an afternoon showing of The Natural with Robert Redford. At Loura's funeral, Dan told Loura's mother that he would help find the person who killed Loura. After Dan finished college, he got a job as a writer at the Daily News Journal in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. There, he wrote about the police. In 1987, he wrote about some unsolved cases, and Loura's was one of them. Dan knew that he wanted to be a cop more than he wanted to write about it. After a few years, Dan quit being a journalist and became a police officer. The first cold case he was given was about Loura Salmon's. The first thing Dan did was send all of the evidence back to the forensic lab so it could be checked. DNA testing had changed a lot, so new studies needed to be done. While that was going on, Dan went after other leads. One was written by someone in high school. In the year 2000, a student at Oakland High School talked about the Loura Salmon's case. The student told everyone that his father had killed and thrown away the body of a girl in 1984. The boy's father was David Patterson. He had been arrested before for a major crime. When Dan tried to talk to Patterson, he found out that Patterson had passed away. He had been killed by a gunshot. Even so, Dan still decided to go with the flow. Patterson's children gave them their DNA. The DNA was compared with the DNA of a man who was at the crime scene. It didn't match up, so he was taken off the list of possible suspects. Dan then went back to John Taylor, who at first had been a suspect. His DNA also did not match. In case you were wondering, Dan also gave a sample of his DNA. After tests, it was clear that Dan wasn't to blame. Dan then turned his attention to one man who had gotten away during the first search. The name David Gilly caught his eye. In high school, David was Laura's boyfriend. He was younger than her by 1 year. At first, the cops didn't believe him because his dad told them something different. On the other hand, Dan found that this story was directly challenged by a witness. The witness saw David Gilly driving Laura's car on the day her body was found. She saw him not too far from the road that led to Laura. The witness said that David's face was blank and that he was just staring straight ahead. She could tell who he was from a group of pictures and from Laura's car. Dan also noticed that David had a habit of hurting people. Loura Salmon was one of those people. When he was mad at her, he would sometimes grab her by the head and hit her against cars, school lockers, or anything else nearby. He sometimes even hit her. At one point, he knocked out 2 of her front teeth. In the first investigation, David Gilly was ruled out so quickly that Dan couldn't believe it. David was about 62 inches tall, and the men's shorts found at the crime scene would have fit him perfectly. Dan asked Jerry Finley for help on the case. He tries to figure out what happened in a crime. Jerry saw that the pants had tiny drops of blood on them. It was a mess from a hit at a medium speed. When a sharp object, like a rock, hits someone, this kind of mess usually happens. The knee was where most of the blood was found. This meant that the person who hit Laura with the rocks was on his knees when he did it. All of this shows the cops that the person who killed Laura wore the pair of men's jeans. Blood from Laura was already thought to be on the jeans, but DNA tests proved it. After that, Dan went to Florida and found David Gilly. By that time, Gilly had been fired twice and was working for the Manitoba County Public Works Department. Gilly was taken into custody because he hit someone, tried to break in, and fought with the cops. Gilly said again when Dan asked him what happened to Laura that he had nothing to do with it and wasn't to blame. Gilly did say that the pants probably belonged to him. When the cops told him they thought the owner of the jeans did it, he called a lawyer right away. The cops then got a sample of David Gilly's saliva on May 31st, 2000. Gilly was the one who killed Laura because his DNA was found at the crime scene. After 16 years, David Gilly was finally caught. Damn, the guy did what he said he would do to help Laura's mom solve the case, and Laura's mom did what she said she would do to make sure justice was done. People thought it was because of jealousy. Gilly thought that no one else could have Laura if he couldn't have her. When she went to college, while he was still in high school, he didn't like that she made new friends. He was always close behind her. Laura's mom tried to get Laura to get a protection order against Gilly, but Laura was too scared. Investigators think that Gilly took Laura to the empty lover's lane and hit her over and over with rocks. When Gilly saw that there was blood on his pants, he took them off and left them at the scene of the crime. He then drove Laura's car to her place of work, where it would be found later. In September 26, David Gilly went to court. The defense said that the fact that another man's DNA was found at the crime scene showed that someone else was there. The judges never thought that any other DNA found at the crime scene was from the real killer. Gilly was found guilty of all the charges against him, and he was sentenced to life in jail. As we conclude this captivating exploration of cold cases that were solved with insane twists, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for joining us on this thrilling journey. From delving into unsolved mysteries to unraveling shocking revelations, we have tirelessly pursued the truth behind perplexing crimes. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell to ensure you never miss our latest investigations.